This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
We've got some fun non-conference action coming up this week across college football in week number 3. We're going to break down those big games, let you know where we are seeing some value for this week by talking to Dr. Ed Feng at thepowerrank.com. Welcome on into Covering the Spread. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, joined here as I am every Wednesday by Dr. Ed Feng. You can find him on Twitter at thepowerrank. Check out his work at thepowerrank.com and on the Football Analytics Show. Ed, week number 3, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. It seemed like a non-interesting slate of college football last week, but it turned out to be anything lacking of interest with the just the number of crazy games that happened. I got home from a youth soccer game and relaxed to a little bit of Alabama and Texas.
Relaxed?
Obviously.
How can you relax to that?
Oh, that was so much fun. I
Yeah.
mean, just, you kind of knew that Alabama was probably going to pull it out. And,
Yeah.
But it was, I don't know. I mean, I don't have any stress watching, I thought it was kind of nice that Texas showed up to play at home and gave them a game. Kind of ended like I thought it would. I think if I would have really been fired up, I would have been pretty mad when the refs kind of missed the holding as Bryce Young scooted by his left tackle in the fourth quarter of that game. I don't know. I just wasn't worked up about it.
Yeah, I wasn't like worked up in terms of like being like stressed. I was just like having fun, and like I can't like relax when I'm having as much fun as I was having watching that game. Part of it was like, so I was at a FanDuel event, and one of the people who was there was Nate Robinson, like the old Knicks player. The guy who won the 6-foot guy who won like a couple dunk contests. He played college football, and I did not know this. He was like a cornerback. Yeah, and I had no idea about that. So like, listening to him talk about the games, I was like, oh, this is absurdly insightful. Like, we should have you talk college football on a thing. Cause he was like, he was like super, super informed. Watching it with like a bunch of people who like love sports betting was enjoyable. I got to distract myself from the Northwestern fumble at the goal line in that Duke game. So it was a lot of fun. Like you said, it kind of felt inevitable that Alabama would come back and wind up winning that game, but the path to get there was a delight, I thought.
Yeah, I also thought it was kind of inevitable that Russell Wilson would march the Denver Broncos down the field for a game-winning field goal, but that didn't happen, and that was very strange. I was sitting there trying to prep for a podcast with Rob Pizzola the next day, just expecting Russell to get them into field goal territory, and then oops, his coach actually thinks they are in field goal territory.
Right.
Oh, yeah, big shocker. He missed a 64-yard field goal.
Yeah.
Just, I don't know. It's been a couple days. I think I'm not quite as in shock, but I think all of Tuesday, I was still in shock and appalled by what had happened in that Monday night game. Nathaniel Hackett's first game as a head coach, not what you want to do there.
Well, I know that Hackett was not there last year, but that's the decision you make if your quarterback is Drew Lock or Teddy Bridgewater, not if it's Russell Wilson, who is actually playing pretty well in that entire game. Like, his efficiency numbers for the game were very good. And to not trust him to get you 5 yards or not think that the odds of getting that are better than the odds of nailing a 64-yard field goal, very odd. He did admit that he made the wrong choice. So I guess self-awareness, but maybe make the right choice the first time next time.
Even if you're going to kick the field goal, like, call a timeout earlier.
Right. Don't let the clock
or kick the field goal and give yourself 3 timeouts to stop them and get the ball back in case you miss.
Right. It didn't make a lot of sense. I was watching, I don't watch the Manning cast in real time because I like play-by, especially if it's Joe Buck. I like having play-by-play guys personally, resistance. So I don't watch the Manning cast in real time, but I watched like a replay and they had like Shannon Sharp on. He's like screaming, "What are you doing?" Like he was confused about why the field goal team was coming out. He thought that he had like a yardage wrong and stuff like that. And it was pretty wild. Again, with how Russell was playing, just an odd decision across the board.
Yeah, it was very odd. A lot of people have been citing these efficiency numbers, and he was decent. People have talked about EPA per pass play. By success rate, he was about league average. They're about 43% in the pass offense. So I didn't think, they got a lot of a bump from the long touchdown. So I've found that passing success rate is the most sticky stat going forward.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that Denver's pass offense is going to be bad.
Right.
Anything from it. I'm just saying that it was more of a league average performance, and they still need to show that they can do better. But we can actually really get back to college football, right? Because then Marshall goes in and beats Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And now I'm starting to get jacked up because I called Notre Dame overrated this preseason.
I forgot about that.
It's almost impossible for them to climb back up to 5th in the nation after starting 0-2.
No, there's no shot.
So that was pretty fun.
Yep.
And then I went to the Michigan game.
Oh, you did?
Which was wet. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. And obviously I didn't stay past for the first half when they were up 42-0.
Did you lay the 51?
No. And I actually thought the other side was probably the right side just because that all depends on who plays in the second half for Michigan. Sure. And, not surprising they weren't as good. And actually Cade McNamara was not good. He got a couple drives in that game. And I think cemented his spot as the backup. JJ McCarthy looked pretty good. Not surprising at all that he's going to get another start and probably has the position until further notice. And Michigan doesn't really have they play UConn, which is kind of funny. And then they get Maryland in conference, which doesn't seem particularly difficult. And then they have to go to Iowa at some point soon, which at the beginning of the season seemed like a very difficult road trip. It's not seeming like as difficult a road trip.
Yeah.
So it's hard to go to Iowa City. So we'll see.
Did you get back in the Michigan game in time to watch your USC bet win? Stanford tried to get that backdoor cover, unsuccessful. Yeah. You're 3-0. Did you get back in time to watch that game?
I did not because I flipped on Nebraska.
Oh, I watched that too. Yeah.
Georgia Southern. And poor Scott Frost just couldn't get it done.
They decided to fire him now as opposed to waiting 2 weeks and saving themselves $7.5 million, which kind of seems like an on tilt kind of decision. I'm guessing some donors pitched in to get that done ahead of time, but it just seems like it was I'm tilting right now and I'm going to do this regardless of consequences kind of thing. But I mean, it was the quarterback for Georgia Southern's nickname was like the Ginger General or something like that. If you get defeated by a person whose nickname is the Ginger General, I think you kind of got to go at that point.
Yeah, of course. And then at some point later that night, I was like, oh, App State beat Texas A&M. That's kind of a big deal.
Yeah. And now they get College Game Day at App State.
So an incredible week of college football.
Absolutely. And hopefully this week can kind of duplicate that, where it's not the most dazzling slate by any means, but there are some fun games. We're going to break down those games, let you know what Ed's numbers are saying about them, and get you set for week number 3 in just 1 second. But first, a reminder to make sure you are subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. We, of course, have daily shows here every week on the Covering the Spread podcast feed. Tomorrow, we'll talk with Ryan Williams about week 2 in the NFL. And on Friday, JJ Zachariason swings by to talk about some player props. I put my week 2 thoughts out there yesterday on the show. On Tuesday, breaking down my models, initial read on the games, some games I was okay betting and some where I was monitoring and holding off to potentially bet on them later on. Get all that by subscribing to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. Also, FanDuel has an all-new mobile gaming app, FanDuel Face-Off. FanDuel Face-Off is where you compete in quick, fun games against other real people for real cash. It has all sorts of games you're familiar with, like Home Run Derby, Wheel of Fortune, puzzle and strategy games, and Pat McAfee's kicking game. Contests are action-packed and last between 2 to 5 minutes, so you can play on your couch, waiting in line, during a commercial break, wherever and whenever on your schedule. Plus, you can practice for free anytime, whether it be head-to-head, multiplayer, or large tournaments. FanDuel Face-Off has something for you. Plus, in most contests, you'll be matched against players of similar skill levels, so you're never totally overmatched, even as a beginner. Face-Off is also tied to your FanDuel account and wallet, so you can easily use your daily fantasy funds or sportsbook winnings in the app. Visit FanDuel.com/faceoff or download the FanDuel Face-Off app in the Apple App Store today to get in the game. Age and location restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See FanDuel.com/faceoff-terms for terms and conditions. Now, before we dive into the actual games for this weekend, I did want to talk to you about your model. You can talk a bit about how you've shifted in the past couple of years to a model that updates more quickly, reacts more quickly to new data. But we're only 2 games in, potentially 3 games in for most teams. So how reactive are your numbers to what we've seen so far in a very small sample this year?
It tends to be pretty reactive, and I've found that to be the right thing to do. It sometimes doesn't react enough, and we'll talk about that in a couple of these games. And sometimes it doesn't react as much as the markets do, and we'll talk about that in relation to another game this week. I've been talking to some other people that do college football numbers and trying to gauge how my adjustments are doing. And half of them should probably be too aggressive, the moves, and half of them should probably not be aggressive enough. So you're trying to kind of split the difference. Mm-hmm. And hopefully overall, on average, you're doing better than what the markets are doing. And, I think I have it about right. And, obviously it's not perfect because you want to react more on some teams.
Sure.
And, everything is automated for what I do and what I'm going to talk about today. Everything probably shouldn't be automated. There probably should be a little bit more manual adjustments. I think the best example of that is Hawaii. So Vandy goes in and beats them the first game of the season. Vandy hasn't looked that good since. And usually, the adjustments that I make are symmetric, and maybe they shouldn't be. Maybe you should adjust Hawaii down more and maybe Vandy not as much in a game like that. Either way, it's still hard to get to a spread like, Michigan minus 51.5 or 52 against Hawaii, which, and Michigan didn't cover, mostly because they pulled the starting quarterback. But I think in the future, it could come down to some more manual adjustments, more adjustments for injuries of key players and things like that. But right now, everything's automated, and I'm hoping to do the best on average.
I think that one of the key things, though, is that once you see what your numbers say, you can add in your own judgment. You can kind of have an eye test and have a feel for, am I overreacting or underreacting to this? So it's kind of like a 2-layered approach where you have what your number says, and then you can go in yourself. Obviously, you can't, do that for every recommendation you're giving out across all of college football. But when you're making your own personal bets and going based off of your own model, you have that second layer of judgment that says, I think this is in the 50% that's overreacting or 50% that's underreacting. And hopefully the combination of those two will allow you to make the right decisions based off the data.
That's the hope.
Absolutely.
We'll hope to get it right today.
So let's dive in and start things off here with Penn State at Auburn. Penn State is a 3.5-point favorite here. Total is 47.5. Auburn coming off, I would say, an underwhelming performance against San Jose State. They did get the win, but did not cover. Can they cover here as home underdogs against Penn State this week?
I think they absolutely can cover. I'm not going to bet Auburn plus 3.5, even though that's what my numbers say. I have Penn State winning by about a half point. I'm just really cautious about this Auburn team. I'm not sure that they're very good. They, TJ Finley is the quarterback, hasn't particularly done much. And, my numbers have downgraded them significantly, a bunch this season already, in particular based on the San Jose State performance last week. When I look at Penn State, I got to think as long as Sean Clifford's healthy, they're a pretty good football team. Franklin has run a pretty solid program, especially the years going through the 2019 season. Pretty solid top 10 program, a team that would not necessarily topple Ohio State, but, through 2019, they did it more than Michigan did. And those were like 2 on average borderline top 10 programs. It hasn't really, been the same for Franklin since then, but, there was kind of the weird COVID year where, I think they started like 1-4. Last year was pretty good until they lost Clifford, and then the offense just went in the tank. So, Clifford's been fine. Their stats weren't as good against Purdue on the road in that opening game, but they still got the job done towards the end of that game. They were able to win a 1-score game, something that Scott Frost was completely unable to do, and, bucked every law of regression known to analytics there. I guess I just think Penn State's a pretty good team. I don't want to bet
Yeah.
against them, even though they are on a road in a tough environment. So I'm going to stay away, even though my numbers like Auburn here.
Okay, so you're showing value in Auburn, but staying away from it. I think that makes sense based on the reasons you laid out. Let's talk about another Big Ten team here. Michigan State is at Washington. This is a 3.5-point spread in Washington's favor. Total is 56.5. Michigan State's a team that we talked about preseason, where your numbers were skeptical of them. And we were talking about their win total and stuff like that. But we've got 2 games of data now. Have they done anything to alter that outlook, or is a situation where you're still skeptical and potentially betting against them here versus Washington?
I'm still skeptical about Michigan State. They haven't really done anything for or against, kind of their perception preseason. And I think my perception preseason was probably a little bit lower than what the markets and what certainly popular opinion is. I'm not going to pass much judgment on them yet, but I actually really like this Washington team. And the main reason is Michael Penix Jr., the quarterback. He was a transfer from Indiana. And you have to remember in 2019, when he was the Indiana quarterback, Indiana was 17th when I look at my adjusted passing success rate. They had a very efficient passing offense. They were never really able to replicate that. They had a pretty good 2020 in the COVID year. But their pass offense numbers weren't good. Like, I don't know if you remember, but he had that, that stretch in that one game, that opening game that they won. And they kind of had this magical season where they won a lot of games, but probably more games than they should have. They weren't quite as good. And then last season, Penix got hurt. Then he decided to transfer. He won the job here at Washington. And I don't know. I mean, I saw him play in their opener. He looked really good. He's left-handed. He throws a really pretty ball. And he could be just the piece that they need. And I've already adjusted Washington up almost 3 points this year based on the performance so far. That might not be enough. And Penix is the reason why. So I have Washington by 1.5 in this game. I think that's low. And I would certainly not bet Michigan State plus 3.5 here. And thank you, Jim, for picking 2 games that my numbers find value, and I completely disagree with where they are going.
I had the same thing on my show yesterday. Looking at NFL stuff for this week, it's a lot of situations where I'm like, I was showing value in the Jets, and that number did move in my favor, but I wasn't going to bet that. Like, I saw Joe Flacco Sunday. I don't want money tied to that. I don't want money tied to Jacoby Brissett either. So I get where you're coming from. We disagree with our models pretty often, but that's a lot of it. It's just a baseline, and then we can deviate from there.
Yeah. The other thing to note in this game is a couple key injuries. Washington has an offensive tackle with NFL caliber talent that is listed as questionable. Jalen Reed, the wide receiver from Michigan State, is also dealing with an injury. 2 pretty important players, so something to keep an eye on if you are betting on this game.
It seems like with Penix, it's always been, if he's healthy, he's going to play well, and he's healthy right now. So I feel like your enthusiasm is justified. Yeah.
Well, he was healthy in 2020 and the pass offense wasn't spectacular.
Right.
So, but I do think there's a high ceiling there. We saw it in 2019 and we may see it again this season.
Yeah. He's a fun guy to watch. So I'd love to see that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's like, there's a couple quarterbacks out there that you just enjoy watching them throw the ball. Deshaun Watson's one for me. But Michael Penix is another one.
Yeah, so hopefully he can stay healthy, and we'll see what he can do versus Michigan State. Let's finish up here with the game-by-game breakdowns with Miami at Texas A&M. Texas A&M still a 5.5-point favorite here. Total is 45.5, and Texas A&M obviously coming off the loss to Appalachian State. Do you see a bounce back here? Potentially a cover? What are you seeing with this one?
I really don't know. I mean, how can you start a quarterback in Haynes King that threw 97 yards passing against an App State defense that just got completely shredded by North Carolina? I don't understand that. Like, I don't understand how, I don't know. I mean, obviously you don't want to react too much, and Jimbo Fisher sees these guys way more, but that's pitiful, right? It's not like App State got shredded by Ohio State the week before. It's not like they got shredded by USC. They got shredded by North Carolina. And then your quarterback goes out and throws for 97, can't even get to triple digits. That has to be really concerning. Maybe it's a fluke and they come back and actually score some points in this game. Texas A&M is obviously a program with an immense amount of talent, and there's no doubt about that at all. I remember talking to Phil Steele before the beginning of last season, and he really liked Texas A&M. And I was like, well, what about the quarterback? He's like, well, yeah, they still got to figure things out. And I feel like we're in the exact same position. They have an immense amount of talent at every position on the football field, except for the most important one. So, yeah, I don't really know what to think. My numbers have Texas A&M by about 4 points in this game. It's suggesting value on Miami. I think that is the right side. I think Miami has shown some promise, and they certainly have the quarterback in Van Dyke that has looked pretty good. Trying to figure out what we're going to see with this Mario Cristobal program. I do feel like that is the right side. I'm not particularly excited about this game.
Yeah.
But that's what my numbers say.
Well, last year we had Drew Martin on before the season, and we asked him, okay, we know who the title contenders are. Is there anyone who stands out to you as being like a long shot? And he named Texas A&M, and obviously didn't pan out, but they showed upside. Like they showed in individual games, they can spike if they get the good play, but it's so hard to know whether they'll get that. So it kind of feels like A&M's more of a team you want to bet in a volatile market versus a spread, because you want to take advantage of their volatility, take advantage of their upside versus subjecting yourself to 97 passing yards against App State.
Yeah, for sure. So maybe when they're a dog at Alabama or something like that. And obviously they did knock off Alabama last year. So I don't know, man. I mean, I got to think Jimbo has a short hook at the quarterback position.
You would think. We'll see about that one.
I mean, right?
So let's move into your week 3 best bets, Ed. We're going to open up the entire board here. When you look at your numbers, where are you seeing the best value that you buy into for week number 3?
Right. So we talked a little bit about how my model probably should have moved a little bit more strongly on Washington, and the markets have moved a little more strongly. So we're actually seeing the opposite with Notre Dame. So I would have made Notre Dame about 18-point favorite. Well, I would have made Notre Dame 18-point favorite over Cal this preseason. I'm still making them an 18-point favorite in this game, even though I've downgraded Notre Dame. And I've also downgraded Cal. Obviously, that's what that means. And the markets probably would have made this 20 points if it would have been played before last week. And now they're down to 11 and a half. I don't know what the number is at FanDuel, but I certainly bet this at 11 and a half. And there are some factors going on here. Tyler Buchner, the quarterback, is hurt. And so you're going to start Drew Pine. Notre Dame's going to start Drew Pine in this game. And that's a little bit of a downgrade in terms of, the running ability, but I'm not sure the offense really goes that far downhill. I think they should be just fine. Cal is a program that's known for defense under Justin Wilcox, but the numbers weren't particularly good last year when I look at my adjusted success rate. So, Cal's going into Notre Dame, and the reason Notre Dame lost last week is because the defense stunk. They allowed Marshall to score a bunch. It also didn't help that Marshall scored on a pick 6. But the Notre Dame defense was pretty good against Ohio State in the first game of the year. It's a unit that we expect to be good. Marcus Freeman was the defensive coordinator, took over as the head coach. And I just think it was a fluke that Notre Dame's defense played bad. They should get back to playing a lot better this week. They should be a little bit angry. I like Notre Dame minus 11 and a half. My only worry is if this gets into a huge slugfest with a total of like 25 points, it's going to be hard to cover 11 and a half that way. But, like I said, my numbers have Notre Dame by almost 18 in this game. I think it's an overreaction to one game with Notre Dame. Remember, this is a team that I thought was overrated heading into the preseason. But remember, that was because the preseason poll had Notre Dame at 5th. This is still a top 20 team, mostly led by the defensive side of the ball. And I think there's a lot of value here.
The spread at FanDuel Sportsbook is 10.5. It's at minus 114 though. The alternate spread on minus 11.5 is minus 106. And obviously not massively key numbers in that area. So it does sound like it's pretty much in line with what you were getting and getting that at 11.5. With that being 10.5, do you think we'll continue to see movement in favor of the Cal side of this where you may want to hold off? Or is this a big enough value where you want to lock it in now and not put yourself at risk should things shift any more towards the Cal side?
Yeah, I really don't know.
Yeah.
I think there's a good argument that it's going to be hard to cover 11 when the total is 41. And I'm not sure. I don't think that total is going to stay at 41.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be shocked at all if it got below 40. So I think there's a good argument there. So I don't know if it's going to move necessarily. Yeah. I mean, I think it should. I think it should move towards Notre Dame. We'll see what happens before kickoff. Yeah. So actually, maybe the answer to that question is yes. Lock it in now because it probably should move towards Notre Dame.
Okay, so 10.5 is the number at FanDuel Sportsbook. Notre Dame, Ed, calling them overrated before the year, but now we are back in. The markets have reacted to the point where they're suddenly a value. So Notre Dame minus 10.5. We'll see if Ed can continue his little streak here and get to 4 consecutive wins of bets recommended here on the show. That's all we got here for this week on covering the spread on the college football side of things. But Ed, obviously, you're doing a lot of stuff outside of just college football over at the Power Rank and the Football Analytics Show. What is going on for you there?
I had Rob Pizzola of The Hammer on the Football Analytics Show. So Rob is obviously a true NFL betting expert and always look to get his advice. And he just started a new sports betting media company called The Hammer. We talked about that. We talked about his motivations. We talked about a lot of teams. So yeah, check that out on the Football Analytics Show, wherever you get your podcasts. And then I write a free sports betting email newsletter. I write about games that I bet. And then we also do 7 Nugget Saturday. I guess it's not we anymore because Edward Egros used to help me with that.
He went out and got a job. How rude. How dare he get a job with Next Gen Stats? Gosh.
Like, well, I mean, you know, some company called the NFL.
Yeah, some dream job? Come on. Good for him. That's good.
Though. So Edward was, we worked together on it.
Yeah.
And it was 7 Nugget Saturday. And I think a lot of people like it. You know, it's like you don't have to be invested in every single nugget, but there's some good stuff there in terms of bets and insights. And so we went bet out into 5 nuggets for 1 week. The first week I took over. Mm-hmm. But we ratcheted back up to 7 nuggets for this past week. And we're going to keep it there. I keep saying we. I'm going to keep it there. Hopefully finding some help from some people. And you know, it's just I try to make an easy way to get in and out. We have an injury report in there now. It's football season, so you can keep an eye on those types of things. You know, that Zach Wilson's not coming back for a couple weeks. You know, Dak actually had an ankle injury last week, even though he played, and now he's hurt again, but not necessarily not going on the injured reserve list. So things like that, I try to, you know, talk about bets that other people make that I believe in. So yeah, anyways, check that out at thepowerrank.com, the free sports betting email newsletter.
You can get that there. And then again, like you said, the Rob Pizzola interview over on the Football Analytics Show, which you can get wherever you get your podcasts. Ed is on Twitter at the Power Rank. I am on Twitter at Jim Sonis. Make sure, once again, you are subscribed to the Covering the Spread podcast feed. Tomorrow, NFL preview with Ryan Williams, player prop betting preview coming up on Friday. Big thank you once again to Ed for swinging by and breaking down college football week number 3. We'll talk to you all once again tomorrow. This has been Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.